Are you striving to achieve a higher level of performance or that certain look? There is help. Welcome to the Super Strength Podcast, featuring candid conversations and motivating stories of success. Now, here is your host.
Hello, everybody. This is your host, Nick Jaworski, and I am here with Ray Tulaney from raytulaney.com. And today we will be talking with Ray about one of the biggest mistakes the majority of people make in their training. It's a costly one that holds them back from seeing the results they truly want. And we're including the concept and mindset required for constant gains, the question of whether or not genetics are holding you back, and 3 time-tested methods to put you on the fast track to serious gains. Now, before Ray joins us, just a reminder that if you have any questions or require assistance or just want to talk to him, you can reach Ray online at www.raytulaney.com. Ray, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. It's great to get a chance to talk to you on this podcast.
Yeah, same here.
All right, so before we get started with everything else and talking about progressive strength training, which is today's topic, we should really go back a page and talk about how did you end up here, Ray? What's your background? What got you into the world of strength and training and fitness? How did we get here?
Yeah, that's an episode in of itself. Well, it probably started like a lot of younger guys. When you're a young kid, you look up to whether it's idols in movies, the heroes in the movies, or your father or your relatives and cousins and uncles and older people around you. And you want to be like them, big guy, strong guy, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. Physical capabilities were kind of really, I almost want to say, regarded highly in my family because on my father's side especially, comes back from, he comes from a hard working class, almost like a farming background. So lots of hard work, lots of manual labor. Mm-hmm. So being strong in all of that was something that they always looked at and was something that they really appreciated. So naturally, that was something that I wanted to emulate. Right. So I got into the world of strength training. And of course, the first thing you look at is the magazines. And you realize you could lift weights and that'll get you there. And, there's always, of course, there's martial arts in the movies. And that's kind of the path that I went down. And to try to make a long story short, I went through a bunch of different, goals. I mean, in the beginning, the thing was, want to be big. And then it was, I don't just want to be big because I'm not just getting just muscular. I'm getting big because it was all about eating too. And then I kind of realized, well, this isn't really doing much for me. Mm-hmm. I remember an uncle of mine at one time was working with my father in the garden, and they were using a pry bar to get like a massive stone out of the ground. And I was, I think on my way to the gym, and they had asked me to give him a hand. I said, I can't, I'm going to work out. And I was just, pretty young teenager at the time. And they said, the gym, they're like, this is the real gym, not the stuff you're going to do. Right. So they had a point, and that kind of had a bit of an impression on me. And I started to kind of go down the path of learning about some of the history of training, different forms of training, as opposed to just quote unquote bodybuilding, but actual strongman type of training, Olympic weightlifting. And the martial arts background I had was a good kind of base for me. It was almost a good proving ground. I was able to see if what I was doing in the gym was actually working when it came to the mat or, the dojo, if you want to say it that way. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, in a trying to keep it as short as possible, that's kind of how my path kind of took me to many different directions. I got into many different methods of training, and I kind of came full circle at the end of the day. And I decided, you know what? I don't just want to be big. I'd like to be strong. And I'd also like to have the endurance to go along with it as well, because there's no point in being really strong but barely having the energy to, wait in line at McDonald's to grab a snack, right? So like some of these guys I see.
Now, when we talked about doing this podcast, one of the things you told me is that you were a straight shooter. And so as we move forward in these episodes, I'm looking forward to sort of cutting through all the crap and getting to sort of your experiences and your knowledge and helping people get strong with endurance. And it's not just for looks, but it's actual real strength.
Yeah, exactly. And you asked for it, so let's do it.
All right, here we go. So today's episode is progressive strength training. And basically, can you just explain the concept of progressive strength training?
Okay, well, the reality is this is probably one of the most important principles when it comes to training. And I would say probably the only thing that would overrule this would probably be to stay safe, obviously, because the last thing you want to do is get injured while you're training or working out. Mm-hmm. So the whole concept of progressive strength training, it's pretty simple. It just simply means to continuously improve in your training. And that could simply be lifting more weight or being able to run a further distance. It could be increasing the amount of flexibility you have. Now, obviously, with the term strength being thrown into this,
right,
we're talking strictly, we're talking along the lines of strength. And the reality is a lot of people, they sometimes they forget that that's what they should be doing. And it's interesting because this isn't some new theory. This has been around for a very long time. And people back in the day, that's actually, that's something that they would focus on. There's actually a story. It's about an ancient Greek Olympian. I believe he was a wrestler. His name was Milo. And I think the way you pronounce the city was Croton. Croton is the name of the city he was from. Milo or Milo from Croton.
I'm looking forward to this history lesson right now.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. It's a little gruesome at the end, but it's pretty interesting. This guy was a champion, one Olympic after the next. He just constantly would win. And supposedly, the story goes, he had a small, I think it was a small calf, I think is what it was. And then he would pick this up and he would carry it every day on his shoulders. Now, obviously, this little baby would grow over the days, or, as the months and years went by. And as he would pick it up and carry it every day, he would become stronger and stronger as the load would become heavier. And then eventually got to the point that he entered into the arena of the Olympics with the full-grown cow on his shoulders into the actual stadium, dropped it on the ground, and proceeded to slaughter and kill it and barbecue and eat it. But anyway, so that's essentially the birth of progressive strength training. And I'm sure it was probably around even before then. And we're talking, 2,000, 2,500 years ago here.
Right. Now, how can we define strength, though, right? You've got somebody who's lifting a lot, but they can't run very far. Or you've got somebody with giant upper body and sort of less defined legs, we should say. So what's that all about? How are we going to define strength?
Strength can be defined in many ways. Okay. So there's guys who are, even within the sports strictly dedicated to strength, like powerlifting, you have specialists. Okay. You got a guy who's the world bench press champion. Then you have the guy he has the record for squatting or deadlifting. Is one stronger than the other? I don't know. Maybe in their specific endeavor or exercise or event, sure. Myself, I like to think that I don't like limiting strength to just limit strength. In other words, your ability to lift a heavy weight just once, although I do think that is extremely important. That's the foundation of physical prowess and athleticism. To me, it's important to be strong all over, have a strong heart. Your lungs need to be able to keep up with your ability to lift, these heavy weights and move them around. So for me, it's kind of a whole package. Strength, endurance, flexibility, everything basically together is kind of the way I look at strength. What's this use of being really strong, but being as stiff as a board? And if you try to do anything that mimicked anything close to being an athlete, you end up tearing something or pulling something. That's no good.
Right.
And at the same time, what's the good of having the endurance of a gazelle, but you could barely fight your way out of a wet paper bag? In my opinion, it's not for me either. I don't really care for that.
All right. So now, progressive strength training, if it's so important, we just talked about, we've got carrying the calf and the cow into the stadium. Why don't we see more people really focusing their energy on it?
I think that comes down to vanity. Okay.
All right.
The sport, if you can call it a sport, some people argue that it isn't a sport, but this sport activity, whatever you want to call it, that made lifting weights, if we want to call everything that, popular or resistance training, is bodybuilding. Right. Now, bodybuilding, the purpose of bodybuilding is aesthetics, and to look aesthetically or visually pleasing. Some people hate on it. Other people think it's an art form. Okay, I'm not here to judge one way or the other. When you are focused on aesthetics, it becomes difficult to measure your improvement, your progress. So in other words, what I'm saying is, if you're able to lift more weight this week than you could last week, it's pretty easy to tell, oh, I'm improving. But if your measurement is my arm a little bit larger than it was last week? Okay, it is, but what exactly made it larger? It can become somewhat more difficult to track that. So I think it is, again, much easier to focus on progress when your goal is to improve your performance. So whether it's strength or endurance, when you focus on performance,
right,
it's quite a bit easier to tell if you're improving or not.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with Ray Tulaney, and we'll be talking about how we measure progress and whether or not genes play a role in our strength development. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned for more of the Super Strength Podcast with Ray Tulaney after we hear from our sponsors. Did you know the most popular workouts today involve kettlebells? It's no surprise. Kettlebells offer a much greater range of motion for increased muscular endurance. Due to the displaced center of gravity, kettlebells are much harder to control, placing increased demands on agility, core stabilization, and coordination. Order your kettlebells today at raytulany.com/kettlebells. That's RAYTOULANY.com/kettlebells. Did you know a strong core not only helps improve power and balance, it can also help decrease the likelihood of injuries. And nothing looks better than a strong, lean midsection. The Power Wheel delivers by challenging your abs, obliques, back, hips, and glutes. The Power Wheel is the perfect piece of equipment for all fitness levels. Get your Power Wheel today at raytulany.com/Power Wheel. That's RAYTOULANY.com/Power Wheel. Now let's get back to the Super Strength Podcast with Ray Tulaney.
Okay, we are back and we're talking about progressive strength training with Ray. And Ray, some guys feel like they don't have the right genes to build the type of strength you're talking about. And you've mentioned a bunch of sort of historically strong people that we know. And there's no denying that they've put in a ton of work and were able to accomplish a lot of things. But what do you think? Do you think that these guys were also blessed with just the great genes needed to be super strong?
Well, I wouldn't be telling the truth if I said no. So, yes, genetics do play a role. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, so what? I mean, at the end of the day, anybody can get stronger. Okay. Can you become a world champion at, bodybuilding or powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting? Maybe not. Okay. But the reality is, who cares? Because many times the genetic traits that make you good at something will actually limit you at something else. Mm-hmm. An example is, let's say, leverages for certain lifts. So if you want to become a bench press champion, okay? A lot of guys love the bench. Anybody who works out, what do they ask you? How much you bench, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what are the keys to making a bench press champ? Is it just to be strong? Well, obviously, yes. But pretty much anybody can work up on developing massive amounts of strength. When you get up to the upper levels of competition, to the pinnacle, there's other things that come into play. And some of those are leverages. And what I mean by that is, for example, the length of your upper arm. So from your shoulder to your elbow joint. The shorter that is, the more you can bench. Another factor that plays into this is the size of your rib cage. The larger your rib cage is, right, the shorter the distance that you have to actually lower and raise the bar. And when you shorten the distance, you can usually lift more. That's kind of the way it works. And if you have the two together, you got the makings of a champion. But again, at the end of the day, like I had said a second ago, those same genetic quote-unquote advantages will limit that person in something else. So, for example, again, coming back to powerlifting, most of the guys that are record-breaking bench press champions, they tend not to be that good at the deadlift. And why is that? Well, because usually to be good at the bench press, unbelievably good at the bench press, guys usually end up looking like T-Rexes. They got little short, stubby T-Rex arms, and big old barrel chests on them, right? Or big guts or big bellies. Well, that doesn't really help you when it comes to trying to pick a weight up off the ground if you got little short arms, because now you have to bend at the hip that much more to reach down to grab that bar. And now what you've done is you've increased the range of motion that's required to deadlift that weight off the ground. And it can be, the same thing can be said about endomorphs or ectomorphs. So you got ectomorphs who are naturally slim and lean. They're the guys that usually, bitch the most about being hard gainers, difficult for them to put on mass. But at the same time, they have no issue with being ripped and lean.
Right.
And once they do figure out how to put on muscle, which they can, it's not impossible for them. They just need to know how to go about doing it the correct way. It doesn't take very much muscle for them to look really, really good visually. They look really good really quickly. On the flip side, you got the endomorph, and the endomorph tends to be the thicker boned, usually heavier, variety of human being, okay? Thicker boned, chubbier, carries more fat. That guy's constantly, or she is constantly moaning about how difficult it is for them to lose weight. They, though, tend to carry more muscle naturally than most guys do after working out for a number of years. So just heavier builds.